Hello, welcome to the X Factor podcast. I'm your host, Charles Epstein. Today I am joined by this podcast's co-host, Genevieve Bartusky. Genevieve, hey, how are you?
Hey, I'm good. How are you?
Good. And you are calling in from
Southwestern Virginia, up in the
South
Appalachian Mountains.
Southwestern Virginia. I am going to refrain from making any Dollywood references. We already exhausted that conversation in a previous
Mm-hmm.
podcast. I think this is our third.
Mm-hmm. It's our third. Yeah.
Excellent. So for those who've not heard the first two, of course, shame on you. You need to listen to those two podcasts. But for those who have not, would have not yet, to give a brief introduction.
Oh, over to me.
Yes, yes. So yeah, just give an introduction to our listeners who've not had the privilege and pleasure of meeting you yet.
Oh, sure. So I am a psychologist and a psychologist with an MBA, and I have a private practice in Texas. I do most of my work through telehealth, and I also do consulting on the side, and really have, over the last year, done a pretty big deep dive into cyber psychology, which is how I met our guest Carolyn. um, through some of my work that I do there. But for those who don't know, my background is in forensic psychology. So I worked in a max prison. I worked on death row. I was a hostage negotiator. I did NGRI assessments for the courts, and now I do this.
By the way, not to be flippant, but I know a little bit about hostage negotiation, having raised a young daughter.
Yes, yeah.
If
Teenagers
you
are
take
are
it,
like that.
yes, if you take my meaning, it's not a negotiation, it's a hostage negotiation.
Hmm.
In any case, this is great. So if you would, you could introduce Carolyn.
Yes. So Carolyn is a friend of mine, and she is over in England, and I think you live in Bournemouth. Bournemouth.
Bournemouth, yeah.
Yes, but she is getting her PhD in cyber psychology at Birmingham City University. So
Correct,
she
Oh,
yes.
just yes, and with Ozzy Osbourne's recent passing, I had messaged her and was like, "How was Birmingham?" And luckily, she stayed away from that during that time. But yeah, that's how we met. We have a lot of shared interests, and so she also has her own podcast, Confessions of a Cyber Psychologist, which I was a guest on. So if you haven't seen that, you should go over there and see that as well. And welcome, Carolyn. How are you?
Thank you. Thanks for the shout out. Yeah, I'm good. Um, yeah, so it's just really great to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
I'm
yeah,
excited to be.
I just wish you didn't mention Ozzy and by implication Black Sabbath, because that's going to take me mentally down a whole other rabbit hole. Actually, I recently saw they have a really nice tribute to Ozzy, right?
Hmm.
Native Son. In any case, never a big Black Sabbath fan, but he seemed like a hell of a guy. And of course, they were very important in the
Hmm.
history of rock and roll. But Carolyn, thanks so much for joining us. Really do appreciate this. So my first question is, what exactly is a cyberpsychologist?
That is a very good question. Because when I normally tell people about cyber psychology, they kind of immediately go into cybersecurity, which
Hmm.
everyone kind of knows the term. But I kind of the name gives it away in that it's about psychology and psychology with digital technologies. So cyber psychology has two elements to it. The one is about how we use technology, so our behavior around technology use and how that changes, and also how technology use changes us. So it's a two-way thing with us using technology and technology then influencing our behavior and our psychology.
Hmm.
Um, and it's relatively new discipline in the history of psychology, considering that the desktop, it kind of started when desktop computers became slightly more ubiquitous
Hmm.
in the early 90s. That's when cyber psychology started taking off. It wasn't called cyber psychology at that point. And there are many different terms that are used around the world. So in Europe, they call it media psychology, and other places they call it internet psychology or human computer interactions. So there's lots of different terms. Um, but it's really taken off in the last kind of decade. There's quite a big hub of cyber psychologists in the
Hmm.
UK, especially in Ireland with the IADT in Sydney. There's a big, the University of Sydney has a research department there
Hmm.
on cyber psychology. And obviously in America, or the US, there's quite a number of cyber
Hmm.
psychologists and universities that do cyber psychology. And it is a growing field in terms of, because it's a very applied part of cyberpsychology, and it covers so many different disciplines because we all use technology every
Mm-hmm.
single day in so many different ways that you kind of struggle, I think, being a psychologist without also understanding cyberpsychology and how technology impacts us,
Mm-hmm.
and especially now with generative AI. You
Yeah.
kind of it should be part of the education at every
Mm-hmm.
school and every university psychology degree undergrad.
Oh,
Yeah,
I
yeah,
completely
agree.
agree. Mm-hmm.
Agree. I just want to make a first comment and interject that no, it's great having you on. It's very timely. As our listeners know, and some of them may not know, we recently sort of did a pivot to the intersection of AI and employee readiness, behavioral health, performance. I mean, these are issues we'd grappled with, but more implicitly. Now these are more frontal concerns, and so it's really great to have you on. Obviously, we anticipated this by having Genevieve on before we made this pivot. So it's great that we're moving in this direction, and particularly great that we have you on. And previous conversation, previous podcast that just dropped. I encourage people to check it out. Is with a Alice Dawson. We talked about neuro psychology, I believe it is, or neuroeconomics, excuse
Mm-hmm.
me, and it's about cognitive biases, a little bit different from behavioral psychology, or I should say, the practice as it applies to economics. And we talked about a whole bunch of cognitive biases and how it relates to AI. So it's a fascinating conversation. I encourage people to check it out. So I'm curious how your work, Genevieve and Carolyn, how it sort of intersects and where it might be different, because it seems that both of you are sort of working very much same terrain,
Mm-hmm.
if you will. Genevieve?
Oh, gosh, where do I start with that? Yeah, it's still so new. Like Carolyn said, like it's still such a new area that I my hands are in so many different things and so many different things interest me. I'm like, ooh, shiny new toy. Oh, look at that. Like it's so that I think that's how Carolyn and I ended up connecting because I saw her podcast and I was like, oh, I should talk to her. Um, but yeah, so I mean, it's some of the side projects is how we're also connecting as well. Because in October we're having a conference with Shield, which is one of the nonprofits I'm associated with, and we're doing it on AI chatbots. And so Carolyn and I are actually, which kind of builds into what we're doing here, we're actually going to be talking about how like the way the mental health systems are and the difficulty getting mental health treatment, the stigma behind it, how in the UK and the US it's sort of opening it up for people to use AI more for that stuff. And so that's kind of how we ended up connecting. And she's getting her PhD in cyber psychology now. And so I also know her the head of her department, who was one of the founders of the cyber psychology section of the British Psychological Society.
Exactly,
So
the legendary Chris Fullwood. Exactly.
yes.
So, yeah, but also just to build on that is that because cyberpsychology is so diverse, that there's loads and loads of different streams.
Hmm.
And my speciality is in digital tech use in the workplace. And I studied that. I did my master's in cyberpsychology specifically in that because I was in marketing previously in corporate marketing. And I did 15 years of that. And I kind of burnt out in the end because I was 24/7 on digital technology, trying to just keep up with work because that was the expectation, and how the cultural shift in the workplace had changed so dramatically that that's what they wanted. So I wanted to study what drives people to, or why there's such a burnout epidemic now, especially in the workplace. So that was my master's, and my PhD is now building on that, looking at how technology is exacerbating that even further with AI. And it was also part of why I wanted to chat to so many cyber psychologists, because there's so many different specialities that at the moment there's not enough cyber psychologists for there
Mm-mm.
really to be a complete competitive overlap. And even if there is, even in that competitive overlap space, there's just so many different things that you can focus on that no one else is looking at.
Mm-mm.
So we overlap in terms of we're both super interested in how technology changes,
Mm-hmm.
how we as humans operate and how it impacts us emotionally, psychologically, behaviorally. And then we differ in terms of our speciality. But there's even in that, there's a lot of things that we kind of build on each other. as Genevieve was
Mm-hmm.
saying, in terms of the chatbots, that she's looking at from a slightly different perspective to me. I'm in the UK, she's in the US, and even in that cultural space, there are differences because the medical system works so
Mm-hmm.
differently. We've got a very socialist type of medical system where medication is free, or
Mm-hmm.
everyone has access to psychological and physical medical help, which is very different to the US. So it's
Yeah, just before you go on, it's kind of curious to me. Here, there's always been that stigma, right? It's
Mm-hmm.
gotten better. Is the same level of stigma attached culturally where you are?
a stigma in terms of.
Stigma as far as people grappling with mental health, keeping it under the radar, being concerned about anybody knowing about it. Here, it's
Mm-hmm.
something that's quote unquote happens in the shadows. People are concerned that people will know about it. It may affect their relationship
Mm-hmm.
with their coworkers, their boss, people, their friends, what have you. I'm curious whether that same level of stigma, as I'm describing it, attaches to people who live where you do.
Yeah, I think the short answer is it depends. I think with the younger generations, not so much.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I think there's almost been a 180-degree switch to being, I have some kind of mental disability. I have some kind of label that I can
Mm-hmm.
put on myself that in some ways kind of excuses my behavior or helps me understand my behavior or
Mm-hmm.
helps me kind of get to a better place with my behavior. I think in the workplace, there still is an element of stigma in a professional environment because you
Mm-hmm.
have to look as though you've got it all together at all times. So even if you're struggling, you don't want to tell anyone just in case you
Mm-hmm.
become part of the statistics in the next round of retrenchments because you're not coping, because you can't cope with stress and pressure. Um, there was a huge campaign, I'm going to say 10 years ago. I can't remember exactly when, where a lot of very or kind of really famous English people, celebrities,
Mm-hmm.
came out with mental health issues, and they did a huge campaign around that. So it's become less of an issue.
Mm-hmm.
I think the fact that the Royals, especially when the Fab Four were still talking to each other,
Mm-hmm.
they had the Mental Health Foundation that they set up. Um, there is still quite a lot of conversation amongst those
Mm-hmm.
upper echelons of society that talk about mental health issues. So it feels as though there's less of a stigma now, generally. But I think it depends.
Mm-hmm.
It depends on what situation. It depends on what gender you are, how old you are, um, where whether it's at work or home, what it is you're struggling with.
Mm-hmm.
So in general, I think there's less, but it
Yeah.
depends.
Genevieve, I think the same can be said here. I mean, we've
Mm-hmm.
also in the last 5, 10 years, I don't know exactly what the time frame is, we had Michael Phelps and other
Mm-hmm.
prominent athletes, celebrities come out and be very forthright and transparent
Mm-hmm.
about their mental health issues. So,
Mhm.
and clearly that has lessened the stigma, right?
I
Uh,
I I agree because I know there was a comparison made between Carrie Shrug and Simone Biles, both gymnasts. So Carrie Shrug, even though she was injured, went and did that one of her flips at the Olympics, ended up
right.
permanently injuring her body, like she couldn't compete again. Whereas Simone Biles got a lot of slack when she was like, Mentally, I'm not here. I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to put myself at risk." And it was just very interesting, even though Simone Biles got a lot of pushback from that. But if you look at those two stories together, I think Simone Biles made the right decision because sometimes you don't have it in you. Um, but yeah, there is still definitely a stigma. When you talk about like not being able to handle it, because I worked in the prison system in Oklahoma for over 3 years, and there was always that idea of, oh, that person's weak, or you just need to be able to handle it and suck it up, and that kind of stuff, which was interesting. But then the officers would show up in my office and unload. I'd be like,
Yeah.
yeah, you
Yeah.
know.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, it's also, I think too, that there's some illnesses that are like en vogue right now, like ADHD. You're being on the spectrum. It's becoming very much like it's okay, which is good in some ways. I think it does lead to overdiagnosis in other ways. I know seeing in, my practice, people are like asking if they have these illnesses, and it's like, no, no. I mean, we can test for it just to be sure, but yeah. But
Yeah.
Yeah.
whereas other ones still have that stigma, like schizophrenia or any of the psychotic disorders.
or bipolar or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So,
Yeah.
and I think in some ways, a lot of people, I've kind of just touched on this earlier, but some people take the label on as a
Mm-hmm.
form of excuse for their behavior. So I
Yes.
think a lot of people self-diagnose because they go online and they do one of
Mm-hmm.
those online tests. Of course, I've got ADHD, and therefore you have to forgive me because I'm neurodiverse. And this is not to put anyone down who is neurodiverse, but I think there are people who are kind of slightly on the spectrum of
Mm-hmm.
being ADHD, and they kind of go, well, I can act this way because I'm
Mm-hmm.
neurodiverse and you have to tiptoe around me. And I don't think A, that's fair, and B, that's right.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it does affect people because sometimes people have, it's kind of a behavioral bias of, I am this way, so
Mm-hmm.
I've got this label, so therefore I have to act this way because that's what people expect me
Mm-hmm.
to do. So I
Yeah.
think it's kind of some ways switched a little bit too far.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's almost like a version of like mental health tourism. You know,
Yes.
I think I just coined a phrase. Um,
That suits it
speak,
though so well.
yeah, I think it's kind of that dynamic.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, before we go off on a whole range of directions, because that would mimic our pre-production
Mm-hmm.
call, we're really struggling for a focus because we can go off in any number of directions. We decided to focus on the human costs of efficiency.
Mm-hmm.
And just so you know, I was really thinking about that this weekend. I was on the tennis court and we were talking about the upcoming US Open. We're recording this on Friday. The tournament is starting in about a week. And I referred to Yannick Sinner, world's number one. And I referred to his game and I described it as his punishing efficiency. So David
Mm-hmm.
Foster Wallace coined the liquid whip for Roger Federer's forehand. I am coining punishing efficiency for Yannick Sinner. You heard it here first. Anyway, so we all thought that that was kind of an interesting way to frame this conversation. The human cost of efficiency, with a focus on AI. Carolyn, I know that your work is broader than AI. It's technology, but obviously with increasingly an AI focus, because that's simply where the world is going. So, just generally speaking, why did that resonate with you? This idea of the human cost of efficiency.
I think it kind of goes back to what I was saying earlier about my journey through corporate, and that's when I started. It was it was the mid-90s, and back then we still had desktop computers. Those mobile phones was just the old Nokia or the Ericsson, and you didn't normally share your work number with people. And once you finished work, you went home, and that was it. You were
Mm-hmm.
done, and then you'd come back on Monday, and you'd come a bit in early or stay late if you had extra work going on. Then I remember, because I moved over to the UK in 2001, and at that point I came across BlackBerry and how so many people in the UK had Blackberries. And there was a narrative in the office around stop using your BlackBerry on holiday, just be on holiday.
Mm-hmm.
And that was right in the beginning. And it kind of became a norm that in the evenings and on holidays, you answered emails, you responded, um, and you just kept on going. And also in those early 2000s, only some people had laptops. It was you had to be a salesperson or on the road a lot, and then you could get a laptop. Otherwise, you still had your desktop. And I distinctly remember when I got my first laptop for work, because it was you'd hit the big time, and you got to just the right level in the
Mm-hmm.
corporate that you were allowed to have a laptop. And that I found was actually when things started going a bit pear-shaped for me, and it started building the amount of time or the amount of hours I would work when I got home.
Mm-hmm.
So I'd clock off from work at 7, 8 o'clock at night, come home, eat dinner in front of my laptop and just keep working. And then weekends, the laptop would open, and there were deadlines and there were things that had to be done. And Monday morning, I got an email on Friday, this had to be done for Monday morning. And then I got a mobile phone that then had emails on it. So then I was always checking that. And I think although I became in some ways more efficient, in other ways I became less productive.
Mm-hmm.
And the human cost of that, and I saw this with so many of my colleagues, the human cost of that is a complete exhaustion and lower levels of productivity during the
Mm-hmm.
week. So you kind of had to work longer hours to get the same work done because you were so
Burn out.
always on. So yeah, burnt out. You're always on, always available. You never get
Mm-hmm.
time to re-energize and reboot both your mind, your body, and your emotions, because work is an emotional labor as well as a cognitive and physical
Mm-hmm.
labor, sitting at a desk and doing knowledge work. And I saw that with my colleagues, and especially the more years you did it, the more it happens. And those of my friends who's still in corporate, I'm starting to see more and more of them hit the same dilemma, who have been living that lifestyle. And I think that there is a culture of efficiency, is that
Mm-hmm.
we can do more stuff because you've got more technology and we can do it quicker. But the cost is we never re-energize. We
Mm-hmm.
never regenerate our biological, mental, and emotional resources.
Mm-hmm.
And that really, for me, is the human cost,
Mm-hmm.
is that we lose when people are getting to the point where they're the most productive. Well, they're able to be the most productive. That's when they're burning out. And those are the people we lose, really,
Mm-hmm.
from corporate or any kind of work lifestyle, because they're just no longer able to function properly.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that is growing even more into AI in terms of, we think it's going to be more efficient. And yes, it will be, and it will be more productive. But how much will we lose, both in terms of the number of people who work in a department, or our ability to do things the way we used to?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm kind of Genevieve, help.
No,
No,
yeah, I'm
we're
like,
I've lost my train of thought.
no, we're gonna drill into that. I just want to interject
Yeah.
real quick because I want to get Genevieve's thoughts on that.
Yeah.
You mentioned BlackBerry, and I know exactly the thought bubble that was forming over your head, Crackberry. So
yes.
just to show how simpatico this is only our
Yeah.
third podcast. It's already a mind melt. Anyway, so oh yeah, Genevieve, if you would like, get your thoughts on that.
Yeah, and I had to giggle when you talked about the first laptops. So I can remember that this is the story. My father had a laptop for his job in the 80s.
Oh,
And it was,
wow.
I mean, I can remember it like coming out and like it went on the kitchen table and it had a screen like, I don't know, like 6x6. But
Uh-huh.
my father, we lived in Pennsylvania, but my father worked in New York City converting a 76 in Lexington, converting that big building, the Continental Towers,
Uh-huh.
from apartments into condos. And so they gave him the laptop for when he was in Pennsylvania.
Huh.
And yeah, we used to go stay. I used to go stay, spend a lot of time up in New York City as a kid. But that's totally like when you talk about the first laptops, that was the first one that came to mind. And I can remember accidentally hitting a button on it. And my father being like, "Oh my God, what did you do?" Because it was like the green on green screen and like you could really mess it up. But yes, but like the thing though too is one of the things two things I'm finding in like doing clinical work now is that people have a lot of difficulties, myself included, the time boundaries of like making sure like this time is for this, I'm going to do this, I'm not going to check my phone, and just putting those time boundaries on things. And the other thing is people, because we're getting so efficient, I think the other cost is that nobody knows how to relax anymore. I don't want to say nobody. That's a very big blanket statement, but it's so difficult for people to relax and to sit down and not feel guilty that they're not doing something, because it's like, oh, there might be something blowing up at work, or this might be happening, or this might be happening, or maybe I should check my phone. And
Yeah. And that's the thing, is that we have come to expect immediate responses from text
Yes.
message or emails. And there's amount of times that this is anecdotally, that I've heard people say, well, as soon as I send a text, if someone sends me a text, if I don't respond relatively immediately, they send me another one going, "Where are you? Are you all right?
Mhm.
Have I done something? What's wrong?" Because we kind of expect an immediate response.
Mhm.
And I generally, I think my friends kind of know me now. It takes me a while to respond to stuff, because I kind of look at it and go, okay, I'll respond to that later.
Mhm.
I'm just focusing on this now because I need to focus on this. And I know if I respond to that, I'll get sidetracked.
Yeah.
And then maybe 2 days later, I go, oh, flip, I haven't responded to it. Let me respond.
Mhm.
But in general, we have this expectation of immediate responses. And there is some research that said that we normally respond to notifications within 30 seconds of receiving them, no matter what the source is, even if it's a very boring source,
Mhm.
or it's random news, whatever it is, we check it, we pick it up and check. And that means that we keep on getting distracted.
Mhm.
And with that distraction, we lose track of what we're doing previously. So there's a cost in terms of how long it takes us to get back to that space of full
Mhm.
cognitive
I think it's like
functioning again.
15 or 20 minutes. I can't remember.
It
It was
can
somewhere
be,
around there is the research. When
yeah,
you're distracted, it takes you another 15 to 20 minutes to get back into what you were doing.
exactly. And it depends on how
Mhm.
long you were distracted for. is relative to how long it takes you to get back into that space again. And often we can lose that train of thought. Because I know even if I've got this idea that I'm just grappling with, it's right there. It's almost at the tip of understanding, and someone or a noise interrupts me and it's gone. I'm like, oh man, that was so close. And I've kind of lost it forever in some ways because I can't get that train of thought back again. And Lee Hadlington has a book called Cybercognition, which is an excellent book in terms of understanding that process of disruption. He's done a bit of research around that. But there is an especially huge human cost in terms of productivity and the ability to maintain concentration. And we think we're being efficient by checking stuff and responding to that cultural expectation of immediate responses, but it's not. It's debilitating our ability to be efficient.
Carolyn, you mentioned that you worked in marketing for a number of years. Did that predate your being a psychologist, or were you a psychologist coming into it, or did you do it concomitantly? I should have said concurrently. That would have been a lot better choice, but yes.
Yeah. And there was an overlap because I left corporate, and I was 40 actually when I left corporate, and I actually lectured part-time at Bournemouth University, and then set up a consultancy, a marketing consultancy simultaneously so I could fund my studies. And I went back to uni part-time and did an undergrad in psychology at the Open University. And the reason actually I did psychology, because what fascinated me more than anything in marketing was consumer behavior and why people did things. So why they spent $10 on this thing rather than $10 on that thing. And that human behavior fascinated me. And it was during my undergrad that I stumbled. It was actually at the end of my undergrad, I stumbled across cyberpsychology, and I'm passionate about technology. I love technology. And I just went, oh, it's so exciting. These two loves of my life. In terms of work, just sit on top of each other. So that's when
But it just seems that, you come by this, quote unquote, honestly, to the extent that, that was to an extent an incubator for some of this thinking. And you're bringing the psychology, the formal psychology background and so forth. So you can speak to these issues and how they manifest in the workplace. So, I just wanted to sort of establish, just generally speaking, all these issues that emerge from this idea of the human cost of efficiency, punishing efficiency. And, when we spoke, we drilled down to some of the costs, for instance, human agency. So how does this affect technology broadly, perhaps AI specifically? How does this affect our sense of human agency, Carol?
I think that also depends. There's a bit of a debate in cyber psychology around whether we have agency or the technology has agency. So it's about, and I think it comes down to our perspective. So you hear people say that I got stuck on Facebook, or I'm addicted to Facebook. I'm addicted to this, whatever it is, and the big tech has got all these mechanisms and that make me or keep me online. But then there's also the other perspective of actually it's my choice. It's my choice to pick up my phone. It's my choice to wear a smartwatch. It's my choice to stay online. And I think it's about whether or not we take on that responsibility of agency for our actions, or if we give up that agency to a big tech company or piece of metal with electronic systems in it, and a bit of software. So I think hoping to answer your question and what you're trying to dive into is that I think we decide if we have agency in the process. And I think that's technology in general, from a broad sense, as well as in AI or generative AI. So AI is a broad category. We have the choice as to whether or not we choose the next Netflix movie that Netflix suggests to us, or we have a choice as to whether or not to accept the next song that Siri decides to give us, or we can say, actually, I want to try something else. So AI gives us these suggestions on what the algorithm produces as potentially the next thing we might be interested in, or we can go and choose something else. And I think in terms of generative AI, that we also have the choices to how much do we trust what we are getting from the output, or do we completely trust it? So I suspect, and this is At the moment, I don't know completely because there's still research that I need to do in this area. But I suspect that the more that prompts engineering that we do, and the more that we get involved in the process of pulling together that output, the more that we take it on board as ours, and the more we trust the output. That's my suspicion.
Mhm.
And I might be wrong in terms of some people may or some people may not, but this is my suggestion, is that we will, if we just put in a prompt, say, give me a song, then or tell me how tall the Eiffel Tower is, that we may believe it or we may not, but it's kind of, we'd probably check. But I think the more we invest into that
Mhm.
prompting process, the
Right.
more we're willing to trust the output. And I wonder also, and this is also speculation, but I wonder also if the more we are trained to think almost scientifically, the more that suspicious we become of information in general.
Mhm.
And we go and find out for ourselves, and we say,
Mhm.
actually, this is what this person's saying. Now I need to find out what the other argument is and then make my own decision. And I think going through the whole process of doing a master's and now going through a PhD is that this is how you trained when you are thinking like a
Mhm.
scientist, is that you look at both sides and you make your own decision based on the arguments
Right.
and potentially your
Mhm.
worldview and your epistemology and all the other fun stuff that we have going in, and biases and other stuff we have
Mhm.
going into the process of thinking. Um, so I think, yeah, I think it's a personal choice as to your
Mhm.
agency when it comes to technology in general and AI in particular, and how much you
I'm really
decide you want to
curious what you
trust.
got. I'm really curious what you guys are going to speak to when you do that joint presentation on chatbots.
Mhm.
I think I think Genevieve, you and I talked about chatbots, and this is not a new topic
Mhm.
to the extent that you feel like you're dealing with a sentient
Mhm.
presence on the other side, something you never felt when you are doing a Google search. You never felt compelled to say
Mhm.
thank you and please to Google, where of course you do when you're
Mhm.
interacting with ChatGPT or any of the other LLMs. Um, so is that different as far as it relates to human agency, to the extent that, yes, we all technically have human agency, but when
Mhm.
you have this sense that on the other side there is a sentient entity, does that change the dynamic?
I think it could. Um, absolutely, because there is something called the ELIZA effect. Oh my gosh, and the official name for it has just escaped my brain. But yeah, where it's like where
I think that's what we discussed in our
Mhm.
that's from Pygmalion, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
That's where I got the idea. Yeah, and so where you just attribute human, human characteristics to a machine. So yeah, I think that's gonna have something to do with it. But one of the things I was thinking about when Carolyn was talking that I hadn't thought about before is decision fatigue. Like, are we gonna let it make decisions? Now, as it just my brain went like 800 directions at once. But like as like we're getting more productive and like we talk about like that time and like doing stuff all the time, having to respond all the time, that you get tired of making a decision. Like if you're ever at the end of the night, like, had a rough day at work and somebody's like, what do you want for dinner? I have no idea. Like the thought of making that decision is just overwhelming at the moment. So I'm wondering, like, how much of that is going to influence the trust in AI, just because people's brains are just exhausted and they don't have it in them to decide what to have for dinner or what to do this weekend. Like I can't make that decision right now. My brain's overloaded.
I
Yeah.
think it probably will, and I think to a large degree we're going to get to that point because it's an aid, and that
Mhm.
if we see it as an aid and something to give us ideas, I think that's a really great way to do it. Because sometimes if you run around a group of people and you're tired and you don't want to make a decision, you kind of put it out to the group. What does
Mhm.
everyone else want to do? Because you don't want to make the decision for everyone else.
Right. Mhm.
Right. Um, I was going to ask another question, but it seems kind of related to human agencies, people's perception of self, particularly examining whether work created with AI prompting is viewed as one's own or external. I'm going to give you the option of it's starting to feel like a game show. I'm going to give you the option of whether to respond to that or another question I have teed up, depersonalization. I read this really interesting essay by a psychologist, When AI Automates Relationships, wherein the author meditates on what happens to human relationships when one side is mechanized. So I'm going to leave it, Carolyn, since you are our guest, I'm going to leave it to you which question to tackle. So perception of
Oh,
self or depersonalization.
um, I kind of want to swing back to something that you were talking about earlier in terms of humanizing technology. And I
Okay,
was
so
just
doing
thinking
number
when you,
three. Okay,
yeah. So I was
okay,
thinking with that because a lot of people humanize their animals and their pets.
Mm-hmm.
yes.
And I think we have this basic human nature to give human characteristics to things because it's easy to describe stuff. And we like analogies
Mm-hmm.
because it's easy then to explain things. Um, and as there, we did quite a few decades ago start talking about our brains in the same way as, our processing mechanisms the same way that we describe computer technology. And we've now reversed that and we've given the um, technology human characteristics. And I suspect, also huge speculation from my side, but I suspect giving something human characteristics and human behavioral words to describe processes how sets us in along that path of
Mm-hmm.
thinking it is human. So if I to talk about, okay, so let me give you an example of I've never spoken about my dogs being children because people kind of say, oh, your uh, uh, puppy mother or whatever
Mm-hmm.
it is, a dog mother. And I kind of go, no, I'm not. I'm the owner. They're my pets because there is a definitive point where you switch over to a very different way of thinking about
Mm-hmm.
stuff. And I think when we start giving human labels to things that are not necessarily human, we switch over to a whole different part of feelings and
Mm-hmm.
connections. And I suspect that that's what we've done with artificial intelligence. Even the word intelligence, it's not intelligence.
Mm-mm.
It's an algorithm. It's a very sophisticated predictive algorithm, and it's amazing and it's extraordinary the power of it. But it's
Mm-hmm.
not intelligent like a human is intelligent, and it doesn't have feelings and it doesn't have that ability to connect with us in that
Mm.
way. And maybe this is leading into the first question or the second question, whichever one it
Mm-hmm.
was, about the relationships and the one-sided humanness of a relationship
Mm-hmm.
with a bot or
That
a
that that was option. That was option two.
option two. So I went to option three,
Option two.
back to option two. Is I suspect that, and this is yes, also speculation, and I think that because in the West we have this idealized perspective of individualism
Mm-hmm.
and being our own self, and not being in this kind of community type of culture that you have in the East, that this has almost taken it to the extreme of we are, and I suspect that this is why we have this loneliness epidemic, because we've separated ourselves in this isolated way, that we are individuals, um, we are our own selves, and we've lost that sense of community. So we need community because we are community beings. We are human connectors. That's what we do. And because we don't have that sense of community, we're reaching out to
Mm-hmm.
something, and anything is better than nothing. And if you think of young children who are isolated or um, single children,
Only children.
only children, single, um, or those who don't have a huge group of friends or
Mm-hmm.
whatever that is, they kind of have pretend friends
Mm-hmm.
because we need that connection. And I don't know how much different that is in a grown-up sense of this is my pretend friend. I need that connection. I need someone to talk to. I need someone to talk out my stuff. I need a connection. Um, but I think there is an element of there's those who will really connect with it. And I think there's those who will go, yeah, I don't want this.
Mm-hmm.
And I've spoken a few times to, and particularly on LinkedIn, about if I had to email someone and the response back, I distinctly knew that it was an agentic response, I would shut down all trust with that person. Because if I've taken the time and energy to be human and they can't be bothered,
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure I want to
Yeah.
spend my time engaging with someone's agent.
Mm-hmm.
Agentic AI. If it's a human agent, fine. But if it's a secretary, fine. But if it's a bot, I'm not sure. Yeah, I don't want that kind of relationship with someone, even a professional
Yeah.
one.
No,
Yeah.
I find
Yeah.
myself like when I call customer service and they give you the bots that you talk to. Oh,
Yeah.
they send me into a tizzy. I hate them. I do.
Yeah.
I'm always
Yeah.
like, "Give me a human
Exactly.
being." Like, I don't wanna
Exactly.
talk to a bot.
Yeah. And to the point that we've actually chosen an energy provider where they're humans. You pick up the phone and you talk to a human that's in the
Mhm.
UK, and it's the most refreshing thing. And it's almost like I don't care how much it costs. Just give me a human to
Mhm.
talk to that I can
Yeah,
speak to. So
there was a point where those kind of calls were infuriating. Now we kind of long for them.
desperate.
I moved our company's hosting provider from one to another. That's there. You can't get a human being on the phone. It's
Yeah.
all AI. And their chatbot is very sophisticated and very good and gives you good answers, but it's not a human. And it doesn't
Exactly.
have that agency. It can't do things for you. It can only give you some answers and direct you of things that you need to be directed to. But there is something missing, and it's more than just the quality of the support. There's something missing, and it's very frustrating. And I'm not sure I'm going to stick with that company because of
Mhm.
that element. I just foresee problems
Yeah.
down the line.
There's nuance to human connectedness, which goes beyond anything that a algorithm or can give you, even
Mhm.
if it's an incredibly sophisticated algorithm. There is just that human connection, the nuance to human
Mhm.
connection and empathy that is not replicable at all.
Right. Mhm.
Yeah,
No,
which
I agree.
leads sort of to the last question, and I actually have some others. So we're going to have you guys, or well, Genevieve, of course, is going to be back, but Carolyn would need to have you back to pick up some of these threads. There's just so much stuff. Love to
Mhm.
talk to you guys, the both of you, after your presentation on chatbots. That's going to be really interesting. But last question, which I think would flow from what you're saying, and it's based on our previous conversation, where you predicted a growing distrust in technology, especially generative AI, leading to a resurgence of authentically human communities and traditional skills.
Mhm.
So I'd like you to unpack that a little bit because that's actually a nice thought.
Yeah. It was one of the things that I say to my friends whose children are kind of coming into the space where they're wanting to think about a career is with technology. I'm suggesting these days either go into the humanities, but actually more than that is go into the trades
Mhm.
because there's less chance of your job being replaced by automation. But I think generally, I think we're going to, because we're becoming so automated, because a lot of these companies, and especially big corporates, are moving to chatbots and moving to automated responses, that I think a lot of people are going to start, well, actually, I want to speak to humans. I want to go to
Mhm.
my local baker. I want to go to my local artisan. Um, and I want to be able to talk to someone. And even if I pay a bit more money, if I can afford it, if I pay a bit more money, at least I know I'm not being tracked. My data
Mhm.
is not being sold or used, and I'm not going to be recommended the next product I need to buy. So it kind of takes back a
Mhm.
bit of agency. And I've seen that actually in our local little town. We've got a baker who is a specialist artisan baker, and there is always queues outside this baker. Every single morning, there's queues to get in.
Mhm.
And bread's expensive, but flip, it's just so nice to have something that you can actually go and buy. Um,
Yeah.
and I think, kind of, I was also thinking about this after our conversation that if we think about back in the 80s and 90s when a lot of TV dinners started to become the norm and a lot of manufactured foods started to become the norm, there was a real shift away from that after a while to there's a lot more foodies around and and
Mhm.
that's when all the celebrity chefs started coming to their own because we want to learn how to cook and we
Mhm.
want to enjoy the taste of food and the essence of food and the community of food. And I think we've got this, as Genevieve was saying in the beginning, is that there's lots of nice, shiny things, and oh, there's AI, and oh, I could do all this fun stuff, and it's exciting and it's interesting and it's fun. But I think we will kind of get over
Mhm.
that and move to a place of actually, no, this is just, it's functional, it's useful, it helps me, but I need to step away from an I want community and I want people and I want
Mhm.
to put it down and switch it off and leave it behind and go speak to humans. So that's where I'm predicting. It might take a couple of years. It might take a
Mhm.
decade. I think it'll be about 5 years that we'll see this massive shift, and especially amongst the younger generations, just going enough. I'm done. And
Mhm.
actually, ex-gens, when you're kind of leaving the work, going, I'm
Yeah.
done. I'm done. I want humans, and that's all I want. My phone stays at home and it
Mhm.
gets switched off, and I'm done.
By
Mhm.
the way, were you born and bred in Birmingham? Birmingham?
No, No, I was born and bred in South Africa, and then I moved to the UK at the turn of the century, which makes me feel
Oh,
really old.
oh, no, no, no. Because I was going to say what's particularly encouraging is that, Birmingham is known for being, sort of the seat of industrialization, right?
Yeah,
That kind of industry. So to hear somebody talking about the resurgence of crafts steeped in
Mm-hmm.
that environment is
yeah.
particularly encouraging.
No, I don't have that kind of. The only thing I can say is that the first time I ever went to Birmingham was in January this year when I started my PhD in artificial intelligence. So it's complete opposite to what it originally started as.
Well, before we go, I have to make Genevieve. I don't want to. If you want to say something, I'm
Mm-hmm.
going to ask you to wrap up with some closing thoughts, but a couple of things before we get to it. And these are just kind of flippant, silly thoughts. But number one, you mentioned TV dinners. You ever see the movie Stranger Than Paradise, the Jim Jarmusch movie, where he
Mm-mm.
explains, the John Lurie character explains to his visiting cousin who's coming up from Czechoslovakia what a TV dinner is. She's never seen. Well, it has all your basic food groups, and you eat it while you're watching TV. It's a TV dinner. Number two, great movie, by the way. Number two, you mentioned how we tend to aggrandize our pets. We assign these
Mm-hmm.
anthropomorphic. I sort of go in the other direction when I'm with Gigi or Poodle. It's actually a Labradoodle. And I always feel incredibly sad that she has these cognitive deficits vis-a-vis a human being, and she can't possibly. We try to treat her as a member of our family, but she just has these deficits, so it's kind of sad,
Mm-hmm.
and I feel that. Anyway, Genevieve, any closing thoughts to bring us home?
Well, I have 4 dogs, and they're all my babies.
Ah, so much for that.
Yeah.
My mother refers to them as her grand dogs. So, but the whole family's like that. Like, that's it. My kid has 2 cats, 3 cats. They're his babies. Like, it's mm-hmm. Yeah,
Talking
Effort.
about go from here to there. We started here, and we're all of a
but
sudden talking about our pet. But
as
yeah,
well, I was gonna say oh, go
I'm
ahead.
sorry.
Yeah, I was gonna say
No, I
as
just
Carolyn
wanted
was
some of your closing thoughts
yeah,
on the conversation.
she was talking about like the community stuff, and I was thinking like here, because I live in a small town, it's so easy to do that stuff, like farmers markets. We go to the farmers market. My dad loves like all these like weird little tiny like small town stores that we have. Like we have like the little like Walker stand, which has like local folks with local produce. We get produce at the hardware store. Like, it sounds really weird, but yeah, like I mean, and I go to the farmer's market, and it's just stuff that people grew down the street. And even the eggs that we buy, they're brown and blue and polka dot and white and all different colors. And the lady's like, "Look, I'm not sorting them. You get what's in here." Like, all different sizes, all different stuff. And it's so nice. I mean, it's just so relaxing at the end of the week, like not worrying about my cell phone, not dealing with that, and just going to the farmer's market and like doing that stuff and like playing with the food and have a little garden and getting tomatoes out of there. It's so nice. It's like everything has been like prepackaged and the life has been sucked out of it that, you know, like even a tomato in the supermarket is so different from the garden. And I think
Yes.
that's sort of like, as Carolyn was talking about, like the AI and the technology like sucks the soul out of things, that it becomes so nice to have those moments and to like, bring back some of those
Yeah.
grandma, what do they call them? Like
Yeah.
grandma hobbies? Like, I'd love
Grandma hobbies.
jigsaw
Yeah.
puzzles.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I think that technology has its place, and I think we're going to be putting it back in its place. And I think
Mhm.
that's what we all need to start doing, is and it's flipping useful. It's really good. It's so many things, but we need to put in its place and
Mhm.
just take time out to live, and be
Yes.
human, and
Mhm.
connect. And we're going to get back there. I have
Mhm.
hope.
Okay. Well, you know what? Let's say no more. I think that's a perfect way to close this conversation, the first of several. I am sure, Carolyn, thanks so much. This is great.
You're
Genevieve, of
welcome.
course, thanks. Looking forward to seeing you guys again. And good luck on this presentation.
Thank you.
Thank you.